Hey guys, tonight we're going back together to the Titanomachy War in Greek mythology, a great war between the Titans, led by Cronus, and the Olympian gods, led by Zeus. The world began in a state of chaos, from which Gaia, Earth, emerged and created Uranus, Sky. They gave birth to the Titans, the Cyclops, and the Hecatonchires, the 100-handed giants. When Uranus imprisoned his children inside the Earth, Gaia and her son Cronus plotted to overthrow him. Before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I'm doing here. And tell me in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from all over the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that gentle humming sound. And let's begin our journey tonight. No whiteboard, no clock, no one saying, okay, let's begin here. Because before here, there was nothing. Imagine you're floating in a sea of black ink. No gravity, no limits. You try to close your eyes, then realize eyes haven't been invented yet. You don't know if you're drifting, or standing still, or dreaming inside someone else's dream who never had a name. That's chaos. Not chaos like getting stuck in traffic at 7 a.m. Not mess like your room after a week of not cleaning. No, chaos is the original emptiness. It's when everything you've ever thought of hasn't shown up yet. It's what existed before existence. It has no face, no voice, no scent, only a feeling, a vague sensation, tense like a stretched string, and lonely to the point even it doesn't know it's lonely. No whispers, no breath of wind, just silence so deep that even if you had ears, you wouldn't know what to hear, but you feel it. As if your soul is floating through a cold, thick, colorless blanket, and no one else is under it, and then no sound, no signal. Have you ever seen a crack appear on a mirror just before it completely shatters? Chaos is like that. Maybe it didn't want to create anything. But when you're too empty, something inside you wants to be filled. A crack appears in the heart of chaos. Not a crack to break, but a crack to give birth. From that silence, from that unnamed nothing, a very gentle force, very slow but persistent like an underground spring, starts to push, to shape, to separate, to carve a path. And then, like the universe's very first sigh that no one ever heard, Gaia appears. No midwife, no slap on the back, no umbilical cord to cut. Gaia doesn't step out, she rises from the deepest part of silence, a first form, a first heartbeat, a first will with shape and soul. She is Earth. Not the blue planet spinning around the sun, but the mother of all things solid, still and cracked. Gaia has no eyes, but she knows she doesn't want to lie still forever. Each time she trembles, the rocks begin to stretch. Her core is hot, soft, and full of an instinct. I must give birth to something. I can't stay bare like this. And when you're the Earth, you quickly realize one thing. A floor without a roof is just freezing. So Gaia creates Uranus, the sky. No one says his name, no sparkly light, no divine soundtrack, just a gentle motion, a blue blanket covering Gaia as she lies breathing. Uranus doesn't kiss Gaia's forehead, No one has a forehead yet, but he wraps her like a dream that never ends. No wedding papers, just a feeling. We belong together, at least until the first fight. And they begin having children, not one, not two, but so many they lost count. The giant titans, the one-eyed cyclops, the 100-handed, 1,000-eyed creatures that would later make Olympus tremble. But that's a story for the next chapter. For now, just lie still. Inhale deep like the earth's belly. Exhale like the clouds stretching across the sky, because you've just relived the very first moment of everything that ever existed. And the miracle is, it all started from absolutely nothing. Sleep now. We'll meet again in chapter 2, where the first parents discover not every child is cute. If you thought being a parent in ancient times was easy, sorry, you were wrong. Because when Gaia and Uranus started having children, they didn't stop at being responsible. They then multiplied exponentially. First came the Titans, 12 of them, huge, powerful, and quite argumentative. Not long after came the Cyclops, creatures as big as boulders with only one eye in the middle of their forehead. Before anyone could even understand the design choice, there came the Hecatonchires, each of them with 100 arms and 50 heads. Feeling tired yet, Gaia was. One day, she looked at her crowded offspring, like a herd of mythical beasts running around groaning, screaming, smashing rocks, throwing lightning randomly. And she just sighed. Maybe I should make a chore chart. But Uranus was different. Uranus was the kind of father who, if he had social media, would post filtered pictures of the sky and disable comments from his 100-armed child. To him, anything not symmetrical and harmonious was wrong. He looked at the Cyclops as if seeing a font error in a sacred manuscript. He didn't like his deformed kids. Cyclops, weird, 100 hands, gross. He looked at them like software glitches, even though he helped code the system. And then he did what every father should avoid. He locked all the children inside the earth, not daycare, not the basement, the earth, meaning inside Gaia herself. Yes, you read that right. He shoved the kids into his wife's womb. Can you imagine being both the mother and the Titan storage unit? Gaia had to live with that. She didn't dare cough, didn't dare roll over, because every little movement triggered hundreds of arms squirming inside her at once. Gaia said nothing. At first, she endured, braced herself, tried to stay positive. They're only staying temporarily, probably just a few thousand years. But over time, the ground started to crack. Every time the Titans below got angry, the earth shook. When the Cyclops screamed, volcanoes erupted, and Gaia started to hurt. Really hurt. I can't stay pregnant forever. This isn't childbirth. This is torture. So one night, Gaia quietly called the Titans still outside. My children, I need one of you to resist, to overthrow your father. The Titans hesitated. Big as they were soft-hearted. No one wanted to mess with Uranus. He was still the sky, covering everything. Only one narrowed his eyes, smirked. I'll do it. His name was Cronus. While his brothers were busy planting grapes, combing Titan ladies' hair, or meditating, Cronus was planning a coup, not to save his mother, but because he craved the feeling of being the boss, the kind of power obsession that needs no reason and no morals. Gaia gave Cronus a scythe made of cosmic stone, sharp enough to slice through space. No shouting, no rehearsal, just one ambush. And when Uranus came close to Gaia, Cronus leapt, cut, the whole night sky exploded. Uranus screamed. His blood fell to the earth, forming the Furies, the harvest goddesses, and some other creatures you don't want to mention before bedtime. Cronus stood there, panting, scythe in hand, and Uranus, the universe's first father, withdrew forever. Gaia exhaled. The earth fell still. The sky grew quieter, and Cronus ascended, became king of the Titans, and it seemed everything would be fine from then on, until Cronus became a father. And guess what? Another prophecy, another fear, and for the first time in the universe's history, a mother was freed from pain by the very hand of her child who dared to slice the sky. But the price to pay is always the cut between love and fear, and it never healed. Remember the scythe Gaia gave Cronus in the previous chapter? Yep, the scythe that sliced the sky and turned a father into a silent legend. The problem is, Cronus didn't give it back. That scythe, once seen as a tool of rebellion, gradually became a totem of obsession. It didn't just cut the sky, it severed the line between love and control. Cronus kept it by his side like a child hugging a pillow, except pillows don't have their father's blood on them. And when you've just taken the throne, with your hand still wet with your father's blood, what's the first thing you do? If you're Cronus, order, everyone obey me. And the Titan world trembled. Literally. Cronus built a towering throne on a hilltop, like a scar between the sky and earth. He declared a new era, where everything would be orderly, under the hand of the one who dared to cut the sky. Titans were no longer lazy giants roasting rocks. Now they had to fall in line, be on time, follow structure. Cronus believed in the power of control. Those cries had no faces, no ages, just wailing sounds echoing from his belly, even though his belly had never swelled. Cronus began waking at midnight, hand clutching his chest, not because of a skipped heartbeat, but because of a skipped moral. But in his restless sleep, he started dreaming of crying. Because Uranus, before vanishing, had spoken a curse. Your son will do to you what you did to me. And Cronus, even as a Titan god, believed it completely. When his wife, the goddess Rhea, began giving birth, Cronus panicked. He didn't exhale. He didn't fast for spiritual clarity. He chose to swallow. In Titan-era parenting books, under what to eat when stressed, there might be grilled lightning, stardust, or your own children. Cronus didn't overthink it. To him, being a father didn't mean keeping your children beside you, but keeping them inside you. Yes, swallow. Every time a child was born, he reached out, and as if it were an anti-disaster pill, he gulped it whole. Hestia, swallowed. Demeter, swallowed. Hera, also swallowed. Hades, still swallowed. Poseidon, swallowed. No chewing. Rhea had no words left. She felt like a photocopy machine of life, but instead of printed pages, the products got swallowed right away. By the sixth child, Rhea couldn't take it anymore. She turned to Gaia, her mother-in-law, who once lived through child imprisonment. And Gaia, after a Mother Earth-style deep sigh, said, "I've seen this before." And they made a plan. When Rhea went into labor again, she didn't hand the baby to Cronus. She handed him a rock, wrapped in cloth, scented like a newborn, crying fake cries. Cronus, in his delusional panic, swallowed it. Not everyone gets a birthday where your dad swallows a rock instead of you. Zeus grew up with a dual heritage. One side was stone, cold, durable. One side was survival, thanks to a mother who lied well and a father with bad digestion. No questions, no barcode scans, and the real baby, hidden away, named Zeus. And you know what happens when you swallow too much and can't digest? Yep, that indigestion, that fullness was the prelude to the next revolution. Inside Cronus's belly, 5 children were waiting. Outside, 1 child was growing, in silence, and between them was indigestion, not just from slow digestion, but from fate-building pressure. Maybe you've heard of deadbeat dads or strict fathers, but Cronus was different. He swallowed them. It wasn't just an act, it was a policy, a preventive policy, neat, folded, and a bit hard to digest. Cronus didn't need an army, didn't need a cabinet. He just needed a well-functioning stomach, big enough to contain all his legacy. If there were a stomach screening program for Titans, Cronus would have been the first flagged. Risk of internal explosion due to long-term power accumulation. Because Uranus's curse still echoed in his head. Your son will do to you what you did to me. And Cronus had no intention of letting history repeat, unless he was the one writing it. But you know this. The one who controls the most is usually the one most afraid. Cronus started inspecting every diaper, every baby cry, every bundle from his wife. He lived like a paranoid king, sometimes sleeping, sitting up, hugging his belly, dreaming of the scythe returning. Meanwhile, Zeus grew up. If anyone ever asked, "What did you grow up on?" Zeus could say, "Honey, goat's milk, and the will to survive wrapped tightly in my mum's swaddle. No toys, no school. Just cold cliffs and one loving goat. Not in a palace, not on his father's lap, but in a cave on the island of Crete, where a goat deity cared like a mother and a goddess fed him honey and milk. Zeus learned to crawl in silence, learned to walk through mountain winds, and learned to stay absolutely quiet, because every sound could be a signal for a Titan to come find him. The Titan world kept spinning, but Cronus' stomach did not. It started rumbling. Rhea just quietly watched, as if she knew that day would come. And then Zeus returned. No cloak, no cloud riding. Just a young man with lightning in his eyes, and a plan to rescue his siblings trapped inside the Titan god's belly. With the help of Metis, the goddess of wisdom, Zeus secretly brewed a potion that made Cronus' stomach reverse, no battles, no uprisings, just induced vomiting. In the history of revolutions, few begin with the stomach, but Zeus didn't care, as long as the result wasn't bloodshed, but sibling shed. And so, one evening like any other, Cronus suddenly felt a churn in his chest. Not emotion, not anxiety, just plain nausea. And one by one, you never know who will step out of the past until you throw up. For Cronus, it wasn't just food reflux, but memories rising, soaked, gasping, and with names: Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, all safe, intact, soggy, emerged like memories forgotten too long. No one blamed their father, because they knew there are things you can't swallow forever. And just like that, for the first time, the Olympian gods stood together. They wiped themselves clean, put on clothes, and looked at each other as if they'd never been swallowed. Cronus was speechless. He never thought he'd see them again, and especially not after dinner. But that reunion wasn't the end. It was a declaration of war, because the children were now grown. They remembered, and they'd forgiven, just enough not to flinch when overthrowing. Not everyone gets a second chance to crawl back out, and not everyone is ready to face the one who once swallowed them, with mercy in their eyes. But they, the gods, didn't turn away. They chose to stay, not to hate, but to end the cycle. Before there were spies like James Bond, before Hollywood action scenes of trading packages under the table, Rhea did it with a rock, not because she wanted to deceive, but because she was too tired of her husband swallowing their children like snacks. After watching 5 of her kids disappear down Cronus's throat, with that yum expression he kept, Rhea understood this was no longer a traditional marriage. No one taught Rhea how to mother children who would never grow up. She had no spare diapers, no lullabies, just the sound of swallowing and the emptiness in her chest every time her husband said, "Meal's done." Rhea started dreaming of children without faces, without names, just the sharp ache of missing something that should have existed. With that yum expression he kept, Rhea understood. This was no longer a traditional marriage. This was a silent war, where the weapons were diapers, and the timing was a sudden hunger pang. So in her 6th pregnancy, she quietly met with Gaia, mother of the earth, the one who had once been stuffed with children by Uranus, the one who understood pain from the inside. Gaia didn't say much, just nodded. Gaia looked at Rhea, not like a mother-in-law looks at a daughter-in-law, but like a survivor looks at someone about to do what must be done. They didn't need to say much, because both had once been forced to carry what shouldn't be imprisoned. The earth understands the belly, and the belly understands the pain. Then they dug a deep cave on the island of Crete, where light didn't reach, where titans couldn't find. Rhea gave birth to Zeus there, in the sound of wind and the protection of the divine goat Amalthea. And then, the most important part of the operation, she picked up a rock, wrapped it in soft cloth, dropped a few drops of honey, hummed a fake lullaby, and handed it to Cronus. Cronus, as expected, swallowed it whole. Maybe Cronus never checked because he believed he couldn't be fooled. Titanic confidence sometimes exceeded even his belly size. And because of that, a rock saved the world, not because it was special, but because the one who swallowed it was too arrogant to tell real from fake, from consequence. No checking, no unwrapping the cloth, no sniffing. Just simply, thanks, love. Now I feel more at ease. And so Zeus survived. Not thanks to a miracle, but thanks to the quiet courage of a mother who knew how to lie at the right moment. In the cold cave, Zeus grew up. There were nights cold enough for the rocks to moan, but Rhea never cried, because if she cried, she would have to listen again. Listen to Cronus ask, "Where's the baby?" and pretend like her heart wasn't shattering. That night, she rocked the stone, but her soul was rocking her child, because the real baby was breathing against the rock wall, and love sometimes had to be hidden like a drop of honey. No cradle, no teddy bear, just goat's milk and the sound of wind whispering the first lesson of survival. Every time he stirred, Amalthea would gently nudge him with her horns as if saying, "Shh, sleep. If your dad hears you, it's over." Zeus learned how to be quiet, learned how to clench his fists, learned how to look at the sky without calling his father's name. Meanwhile, Rhea lived as if everything was normal. She still took walks, still smiled, but inside her was a secret big enough to save mythology. No one knew, no one suspected. Only the earth and goat's milk bore witness. And you know what? Sometimes a revolution begins with a simple switch. No swords, no proclamations, just a brave mother and a rock at the right time. If you ever thought every revolution started with swords, think again. Because this time, it started with a stomachache. Zeus had grown up, no longer the child hidden in a cave, fed with goat milk and rocked by the wind. Now, he was a young man with a heart full of rage, a head full of plans, and a belly empty. Cronus, meanwhile, still sat high, belly round, his power intact as if he had never swallowed a single mistake. But mistakes, if not digested, will rise. Zeus sought out Metis, the goddess of wisdom and folk remedies, and together they brewed a concoction, a fizzy, slightly pungent mix capable of making even a titan fold over. Metis wasn't just the goddess of wisdom. She was also an expert in emergency purgatives. When Zeus asked, she simply frowned and handed over a list. 1 spoon of star honey, 3 drops from the river Lethe, dragon stomach lining, and a few whispered curses. Zeus asked, "What does it taste like?" She replied, "A blend of regret and onion pastry. No swords needed, no war declarations, just Cronus drinking the wrong cup." And with that, the revolution began at the esophagus. One day, during a Titan wine feast, Zeus disguised himself as a wine-pouring servant, hiding in dim light, mountain scent, and a heart cold as stone. Cronus, as always, suspected nothing. He laughed loud, raised his glass, and chugged. 30 seconds later, the great Titan began to sweat cold. Cronus had once thought, the strong can swallow anything without choking. But this time, the choke came from within. No one stabbed him. No one betrayed him. It was just the past knocking to come out. Is anyone hearing thunder in my belly? Or are my kids knocking from the inside? Then he puked. No glory, no shining aura. Just the sound of retching echoing through the Titan hall, and the splat of tiny gods, landing butt first. Some yawned, some cried. One barely managed to say, "God, I can finally breathe." Not just stomach acid, but memories. Memories with names, with form, with damp breath and gently accusatory eyes. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon. One by one, they emerged like debts long overdue. Zeus said nothing. He just stood there, quiet, steady, as if to say, "This is my family, not snacks." And Cronus, trembling, pale, for the first time, no longer felt supreme. He had just endured a reflux of revolutionary proportions. The young gods, after their second birth, looked at each other. No one said a word, but they understood. This time, we're not going back in. We're going to war. And so, the Titanomachy officially began. And if you thought puking was the end, you were wrong. Because the swallowed child wasn't the problem. It was what you did to them while they were inside. In every mythological war, there comes a moment when you realize you can't beat a Titan with just 6 people and a bunch of anger. Zeus knew that, and he remembered a whisper from his mother, or from the earth itself, or maybe from the murmuring wind. There are beings who've been forgotten, but they still listen, still wait. And so, on a windless night, Zeus and his siblings went underground, not to hide, but to find those who'd been buried alive. Remember the Cyclops? One big eye like a globe, but saw through every trick. And the Hecatonchires, 100 arms and 50 heads, creatures who could trigger earthquakes just by scratching an itch. They'd been hated by Uranus, forgotten by Cronus, but Zeus called them allies. Zeus didn't come with commands. The Cyclops had once sworn never to help again. People only remember us when they need fire, not when we need a hug. The Hecatonchires sat counting hands. 1, 2, 100. So many hands, but no one to hold them. But when Zeus arrived, not with power, but with eyes that didn't flinch, they no longer felt like monsters, but like memories of a world that hadn't been heard. He came empty-handed and with an apology. We need you, not to fight, but to forgive, and maybe to tear the sky apart together. Cyclops looked at Zeus, then laughed. Been a while since I smashed something. Hecatonchires just nodded, and the earth shook. One nod, one earthquake. Not bad. And so they began, not with schemes, not with councils, but by forging weapons inside mountains. The Cyclops didn't just forge weapons, they reforged broken trust. When Zeus came to order lightning, the Cyclops didn't ask the price. They only asked, "Do you really want this to protect, not destroy?" And Zeus nodded. One nod that made the mountain open up. Cyclops, the greatest blacksmiths in the cosmos, created lightning bolts for Zeus, a trident for Poseidon, an invisibility helmet for Hades, that's enough. Time to go big. For the first time, the gods' alliance had real power. Not just rage, but weapons, allies, and a clear goal. Cronus, of course, knew what was coming, and he summoned the remaining titans. Two sides, one sky, one earth collided, not in a day or two, but for 10 years. Each punch from Hecatoncheires struck like a blow to history. Each lightning bolt from Zeus shredded the sky into pieces. And each night, the earth groaned. Please, just one night of sleep. But in the end, the Titans lost. Not because they were weaker, but because they were less united. The Cyclops, once cast aside, helped overthrow the Titan regime. And you know what's funny? While the Titans built thrones from stone, the Cyclops only needed to forge one bolt and hand it to the right person. And when Cronus fell, every tremor stopped. That war, longer than a summer with no AC, they fought at dawn, rested at dusk. Every morning was a symphony of lightning, falling rocks, and screams echoing through the universe. You think rock music is loud? Titanomachy was rock, in planetary rupture form. Zeus stepped forward, didn't smile, didn't cry. In the dim light after the dust settled, Zeus felt something hollow. Not because the victory was undeserved, but because it came after too much loss. Cronus was gone, but the wounds passed from father to son hadn't healed. The 100-handed allies sat down in the dirt. Cyclops wiped sweat with hot stone, and the young gods didn't cheer. They just exhaled. He simply said, "War has no winners, only survivors. And now, it's time to rebuild the world." And so, Olympus was born. When Zeus and his siblings emerged from their father's stomach, they were no longer children. They were living memories, compressed by pain and tempered by time. Cronus had never flinched, but this time he started planning. And war, that thing every era seems to have, officially began. One side was Titans, old, strong, many, and stubborn like ancient concrete. The other was Olympus, young, furious, and freshly traumatized from digestive trauma. Titanomachy, the great war between generations of gods, didn't happen in a day or a week. It lasted 10 years, no scoreboards, no MVPs, just cracked earth, screaming skies, and nobody sleeping enough. By day, Zeus hurled lightning like an out-of-control EDM DJ. Hecatoncheires launched rocks like the sky was a soccer field. Poseidon summoned tsunamis, spun whirlpools, made the ocean act like a clogged sink. Meanwhile, the Titans countered with volcanoes, earth-piercing jabs, and the determination of boomers who refused to retire. Sometimes they fought in forests, sometimes mid-air. Some days, both sides paused, just to change bandages and calm down scared monsters. But the longer they fought, the clearer it became. This wasn't just a war for power. It was a bloody conversation between fathers and sons, between past and future. By year 10, Zeus, with a scar running from shoulder to back, changed tactics. Some nights, he sat alone on a cliff, staring into the black sky. He wondered, if we win, but have nothing left to hold on to, is it worth it? He didn't hate his father, not anymore. Just regret that maybe they could have learned to live together instead of choosing to end each other. He told his allies, "We don't fight for revenge, we fight to end it." The Cyclops forged more weapons. Hecatoncheires used 100 hands to hurl 100 rocks at the perfect time. And when the final bolt struck, the sky fell silent. No more screams, only breath. Cronus and the Titans at last were defeated, not killed, but exiled to Tartarus, a place deeper than post-Titan depression. Tartarus, not just a place. It's the feeling of being forgotten. No light, no echo. Only whispers of those who once thought they were immortal, now counting years in silence. And Zeus didn't celebrate. He just looked at the sky, then the earth, and said, "They were once our fathers, but we can't let them father the future." That's how the war ended, not with thunder, but with a decision to stop. No one laughed, no one danced. They just walked toward Olympus, not like victors, but like children who'd finally grown up. And so, after 10 years of shaking heaven and earth, the sky returned to silence, but people's hearts didn't. The war was over, but the aftershocks inside remained. Some wounds aren't on the battlefield. They live in the silence that follows, because everyone survived, but no one came out whole, because after war comes the dividing, and that is chapter 9. After war, there comes a time when someone has to say, "Now what?" And of course, that someone was Zeus, standing on Mount Olympus, hands still dusty with stone, eyes still ringed with exhaustion. "We won. Now let's split the world in 3. The 3 brothers, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, sat around a scorched rock. No round table, no voting, just drawing lots. No one knew who came up with the idea, only that it was a sacred rock, once thrown at Titans, now repurposed because it was still warm and perfectly round. Hades looked at the rock and whispered, "Once a weapon, now destiny." Poseidon nudged Zeus. "If this rock could talk, it'd be trembling." Zeus shrugged. "As long as it doesn't start flying again, we're fine." They swore on honor. No oil on hands, no tricks, no markings on the stone. Just whoever draws what keeps it, and no unfriending afterward. Zeus drew first. Lightning flashed. The sky, big, chaotic, full of drama, but great for thunder-based content. Poseidon followed thoughtfully. The sea, salty, deep, full of moody sharks, but fewer traffic jams. Hades got what was left, the underworld. Ah, great. The place no one wants to go, but everyone eventually visits. He looked at his hand, slightly trembling, not from fear, but from the feeling of being chosen last. Again, underground, he knew there would be no glory, only responsibility, and loneliness with no holidays. He didn't complain. He just exhaled, a puff of fog. And so, the world was split in 3. The sky, for the one who always looks down. The sea, for the one who always sways. The underworld, for the one who always remembers. But they still had one big concern. Who would watch over Olympus? Who would knock on the god's door when drama broke out? Zeus, not exactly power-hungry, but liked being team leader, took the job. I'll hold the house key, but no one's a subordinate. We're brothers, not a corporation. Poseidon nodded. Hades gave a small smile, the kind that sends a chill. And so, the Divine Council began operating. No quarterly meetings, but full of disagreements, emotions, and Greek cuisine. From then on, Olympus became the rooftop of the universe, a place where gods discussed big matters and argued about old ones, where lightning didn't just come from the sky, but from unresolved feelings. But before order arrived, Olympus, for the first time, had someone cleaning up. A Cyclops wiped the meeting table. A Hecatoncheires carefully arranged the chairs, 100 hands, but very gentle. They said nothing. But in their eyes was something warmer than all the lightning Zeus ever hurled. And the world, for the first time, had something called order. Not perfect, but it had rules, borders, someone in charge. And in every heart, from God to mortal, a breath was released. At least, the rocks have stopped flying. No one knows exactly how deep Tartarus is. Only that, if you scream there, the echo returns, centuries later. And not because sound travels slow, but because even the Titans don't want to hear themselves again. Tartarus, the place for those who once thought they were immortal. No stone walls, only darkness as heavy as guilt. The darkness here lacks not just light, but the idea of direction. You don't know if you're standing, sitting, or floating. And if you cry, tears don't fall, they hover, as if time refuses to carry away emotion. There are no guards, because no one escapes, not even in thought. Cronus, once king of the world, now lies beneath millions of layers of earth. Sometimes, he dreams he's still on his throne. His sons still call him father, not opponent. But then he wakes, in a darkness thick as crushed stone, and no voice replies. He doesn't miss the crown. Cronus only misses the silence of those he once held. No crown, no throne, just the sound of a heartbeat slowing, as if even time is serving time. Titans lie there, not dead, not alive, just prolonged. Each day is a sentence, each memory a sad song no one wants to replay. Prometheus once said, "Freedom has no shape, but prison has a smell." And Tartarus reeks of scorched memories. No one visits, no history is written, but the souls here still remember every moment on the mountaintop. And that is the heaviest punishment, because nothing hurts more than recalling former glory while being forgotten. Zeus, though victorious, never forgot Tartarus. Some nights, he looks down at the earth and sighs. They are a part of us, but also the shadow we must learn to live with. Tartarus still lies there, like a scar that never heals. No complaint, no struggle, just existence, as a reminder that the past never truly disappears. Silent, patient, no one hears it breathe. But every time Olympus trembles, the gods quietly ask, did someone just touch the past? When you're the king of the sky, people think you must be happy. You've got lightning, a throne, a 360-degree view from the top of Olympus. But Zeus, the youngest god among the universe's leaders, was the first to wake up and the last to sleep. Some nights, he sat alone on the temple roof, looking at the stars, the very things he ruled, and feeling like none of it really belonged to him. The sky belongs to everyone, so why does it feel emptier than ever? And that question didn't need Thunder to answer. He had been born in silence, in the creaking wind and the quick heartbeat of his mother. Rhea placed him into the earth, where a goat was waiting. Amalthea, the old goat with curly beard and oddly gentle eyes, gave Zeus his first milk. Sometimes he dreams of that moment, curled under her belly, listening to the wind and the chewing of grass, the most peaceful thing he's ever known. He grew up in a cave, fed by a goat, rocked by wind, and learned to run before learning to trust. The shadow of Cronus wasn't easy to cut, though Cronus had been banished. Zeus still heard his echo every time the wind howled. "Am I becoming my father?" he once whispered in the night. There's no manual for being king, especially not when you've just been cut out of your father's stomach. Every decision felt like throwing lightning into fog. You didn't know what would burn, only that you had to throw. Zeus loved freedom, but order needed discipline. Zeus loved family, but the gods weren't great at peaceful love. Hera got angry, Poseidon sulked, Hades just vanished without notice, and Zeus stayed, tapping his forehead, drinking honey wine like it could help him make less thunder. He craved a dinner without arguments. One evening, where the sound of clinking glasses replaced the sound of slamming tables. But as king, he knew, sometimes you don't get to choose peace. You have to learn to create it, even if only in your head. Once, Athena asked. She stood at the door, holding a thick book, not to read, but to hide the worry in her eyes. She saw her father sitting there, not thundering, not leading, just staring into his cup like it held the entire universe. "Are you scared? Are you scared?" Zeus smiled, not looking at her. "Yes, but thunder doesn't always mean anger. Sometimes it's just how we remind ourselves we're alive." And so he continued, sitting on the throne of the sky, not because he loved power, but because he didn't want anyone else to grow up alone like he did. Zeus couldn't rule alone, not because he didn't have enough lightning, but because too much was happening in too many places at the same time. He could rule the sky alone, but not the sea and the underworld, not when Hera was mad. Poseidon was arguing, and Hades was offline, and so the three-brother council officially began. No constitution, just a rotating duty schedule. Poseidon, long-haired, sea-robed, looking like an influencer in Santorini, stepped into power with a trident and a grudge against whales. The sea was his home, but also what kept him restless. I can calm the waves, but my heart, not so much. Every time a tsunami rose, mortals trembled in prayer. But did anyone know Poseidon flinched too? Not from fear, but because he didn't remember giving the command. That's the sea. It reflects me. And sometimes it reflects against me. Hades, quiet, thoughtful, pale like someone who sleeps little, neither objected nor asked. The first time he entered the underworld, he stood before a gate that made no sound. only a chill like a sigh. "I'll take care of this place," he whispered, not because anyone assigned him, but because no one else looked at it and saw a home. He just said softly, "Fine, I'll take care of the dead. At least, they don't lie." Zeus looked at his brothers and for the first time felt at ease. He remembered their first meeting. No table, just a flat stone and 3 cups of honey wine. They sat in a triangle, not for feng shui, but because none of them wanted their back turned. They didn't speak much, but their eyes met, as if all silently asked, "Can we actually do this?" Not because he could assign tasks, but because someone understood the silent burden of power. 3 gods, 3 realms, not fully united, but respectful enough not to stab each other with tridents, lightning, or wandering souls. And so, order became system, system became tradition, and tradition became scheduled drama. Olympus was quieter, Zeus had fewer headaches, and the world, for the first time, had division of power, not perfect, but enough for gods to argue in shifts. Not all titans were banished to Tartarus. Some were spared, or more accurately, left behind. On mountaintops, beneath the sea, deep in forests, they lived quietly, like memories that hadn't yet been erased. Oceanus, the titan of the ocean, never joined the battle. When war broke out, he simply didn't leave his shoreline. Not loyal to Cronus, not allied with Zeus. He just sat there, watching the waves, as if the waves would deliver an answer. I chose no side, but I missed the time when we didn't have to choose. Mnemosyne, titan of memory, was never chained, but she held the world's emotional chains. Every night, she recalled every old detail, so the stories wouldn't be forgotten. And sometimes, she cried, because the more she remembered, the harder it was to return. Themis, titan of justice, stayed on as an advisor, but no one asked her opinion. She didn't resent it, she just adjusted the scale whenever it tilted. Justice doesn't need a seat, just don't kick it out of the room. The surviving titans didn't need shackles. They were punished with something else, silence. No one mentioned them at feasts. No one wrote their names in new history books. Iapetus, father of Prometheus, still sat every morning by a cliff. Didn't read, didn't talk, just listened to the wind. Back then, we called each other by name. Now, they call me a remnant. He didn't hold a grudge, but sometimes he spoke to his own shadow, because in a new world, silence was the only way to still exist. They didn't rebel. Once, a young mortal wandered into a forest. He didn't know about titans, didn't bring an offering, but before a moss-covered stone, he sat down, placed a hand over his heart, and silently thanked the old things for holding the world together. No one told him to, no one guided him, but from far away, a titan smiled, not because he was remembered, but because someone still knew silence could be a way of loving. But every time a storm rose, people wondered, was that a titan exhaling? They were the survivors, not dead, not honored, just the low, lingering notes in Olympus's symphony. When war ended, people thought peace would follow. But Olympus, even built from clouds and lightning, still had corners that creaked at night. Zeus started hearing strange sounds, not thunder, but footsteps, eerily soft, as if memory was going for a stroll. Prometheus, though unchained, still couldn't sleep. I see Cronus in the water's reflection every time I wash my hands. Memory doesn't need to be relived because it never left. Athena said she once heard someone humming a lullaby at night, but when she opened her door, there was only wind, or something that hadn't let go. Once, during the dry season, Olympus had rain, not heavy, just a few drops, falling like someone slipped. Hera asked, "Who did that?" Zeus didn't answer. He just looked up and whispered, "Not me. Maybe. A memory's crying." Some Titan souls weren't banished, but didn't move on either. They wandered the mountains, without anger, without words. But when Cyclops placed a soup bowl on the table, sometimes it spilled by itself, and no one said anything. Just looked at each other and nodded. At the corner of the stairs leading to the temple, there was a spot no one cleaned. Dust settled, cobwebs hung, though Hecatoncheires cleaned everything else. Zeus once asked, "Why leave this spot?" Hecatoncheires simply replied, "Because someone still stands there, and I don't want to disturb them." Zeus, in a sleepless night, once wrote, "Victory doesn't calm the past, it just makes the past pause for a bit. But the past has feet, and sometimes it walks around the house like it's looking for shoes." Hermes once dreamed of delivering a letter to a name, not on any list. He followed a path to an old door belonging to no temple. When he knocked, a deep voice answered, "Late, Hermes, but thank you for remembering the way." He woke up, cold sweat, and a real letter in his hand. No one knew who sent it, but in his heart, something unnamed now had a name. Olympus, no matter how high, still had a basement of memories. No one lived there, but everyone had passed through. Those ghosts didn't come to haunt. They came to remind we were here, and our silence is part of today's peace. No one invited them, but no one dared to send them away, because true peace is when you live with the dark and you're not afraid of it. From titans to memories, from battles to ghosts, one thing becomes clear: the past doesn't die, it just changes shape. Cronus once swallowed his children, thinking that if he couldn't see them, they were gone. But then he saw his own shadow reflected in Zeus's eyes. And Zeus, though he swallowed no one, still held his breath whenever Hera looked at him like she had once known a different Cronus. The past doesn't lie underground. It lives in a whisper, a rain shower, a soup bowl that tips itself, or a dream you're afraid to retell because it knows you're dreaming of it. Olympus, the highest place in the sky, is still where memories linger beneath the meeting table. Prometheus says, if we forget, we'll repeat. Athena adds, if we remember wrong, we're even more dangerous. And Zeus, he just sits quietly, turning a small stone in his hand, once a weapon, now a paperweight. Ending war isn't about throwing weapons away. It's learning how to use them to keep the paper from flying. Next story. Artemis, goddess of hunting and the moon. Imagine you're a soul not yet reborn. You don't know who you'll become. Haven't even been handed a rice ball of fate. Then, plop, you land in the womb of Leto, a beautiful, gentle goddess who's being aggressively hunted. Why? Because Leto got pregnant by Zeus, the man whose cheating frequency made Greek mythology spin up a backup server. Hera, Zeus's official wife, didn't care whether Leto was willing or not. She only knew one thing. Anyone touched by Zeus must vanish from the map. So Leto, pregnant with twins, became an international fugitive. No place would take her in. No land dared to harbour her. Every time Leto stepped foot somewhere, the ground cracked, trees wilted, people shut their doors and worshipped a new god. She wandered through mountain ranges and sandy plains, walking in silence, avoiding every gaze, carrying life inside her, but living like she'd already died. In some places she reached, the trees shed leaves, rocks pulled back, and springs dried up, nature itself afraid of Hera. They say she passed through Delphi, where priestesses pretended not to hear her knock. At Crete, hail fell in the middle of summer, and when she stepped into the forest of Dodona, even the sacred oaks held their breath. Leto didn't cry. Her tears sank into the earth, becoming silent springs that nourished unseen seedlings. It was a quiet escape, but one that echoed deep underground. Time passed. Labour pains came, but no midwife dared come help. Even Eileithyia, the goddess of childbirth, was blocked by Hera's embargo. And so, Artemis was born, in wind, in stone, under the scorching sun of the island Delos. No bed, no blanket, no birth offering. Only the groans of pain, crashing waves, and a mother's trembling hands. But this wasn't an ordinary child. Artemis didn't cry, didn't flinch, didn't beg to be fed. She stood up. She held her mother's hand, and she helped deliver her twin brother, Apollo. Sounds unbelievable. Well, this is mythology. Anything is possible, even a newborn playing midwife. In that moment, the universe paused for half a second. A new star appeared, not the brightest, but unwavering. A child born in pursuit, who chose silence over vengeance, chose action over crying for help, chose hunting over being cradled. Artemis had no childhood, no cradle, no lullabies, no stuffed bear. She had stone, blade, and the empty sky. When Apollo, her brother, was celebrated for light, poetry, and glory, Artemis quietly walked into the deep woods. No one called her, no one waited, no one stopped her. Maybe like you sometimes. You have to grow up in silence. No one sees, no one understands, no one takes your side, just you, and a voice inside saying, keep going, screw them all. And so Artemis went, with the look of a child who was never protected, yet became the protector of every creature no one else would protect. Today, if you too feel like you were born in the wrong time, the wrong place, remember, the greatest goddess of Greece wasn't born in a palace. She was born among rocks, raised in forests, not pampered, but never dependent. Go to sleep now, if anyone ever asks you. Where are you from? Just smile and say, I was born like Artemis, not expected, but I'll be the last to leave. Artemis didn't ask for permission to grow up. She just grew. One day, when her feet no longer carried mud, but began to leave prints on dry leaves, Artemis walked into Olympus, not as a child, but as a declaration. Zeus, the father with a radiant face and a dark soul, saw his daughter. He smiled. Ah, another goddess. All right, what do you want, daughter? But Artemis didn't look at her father. She looked straight toward the horizon and said, I have 7 wishes and 1 vow. Wish 1, a bow and a quiver of arrows, not for display, but to hunt for my own life and survival. Zeus froze. A child. Wanted weapons. He hadn't even responded when thunder rumbled. A boom from the Cyclops' forge. Fire shot into the sky, sparks glittering like comets. 3 giant Cyclops, Brontes, Sterops, and Argus, nodded in unison and struck their hammers on glowing metal. In a single night, they forged the Kydonia bow, curved like deer antlers, smooth like flowing streams, yet sharp enough to pierce stone like sponge cake. The quiver was made from ash bark, the same kind Artemis once used to throw at the neighbor's dog as a child. Each arrowhead was sharp like the glare of a goddess when someone flirts at the wrong time. The Cyclops engraved on the bow's handle, for the one who needs no protection, for they are the protector. A child wanted weapons, but he knew Artemis wasn't asking for fun. She asked like someone who already knew exactly what her first target would be. Wish 2, a short chiton, so I can run through the forest without getting tangled in useless silk. She didn't want a princess dress. She wanted freedom of movement. There's nothing more humiliating than tripping over your fashion while chasing a wild boar. And so the fashion goddesses, usually summoned only for weddings or red carpets, were, for the first time, asked to design an outfit for a goddess who had no intention of walking any carpets. Artemis's chiton didn't reach her ankles, had no diamonds, no tassels. It stopped at the knees, sand-colored, rough fabric tougher than faith in Zeus. They say when the outfit was finished, a breeze swept through the forest, and every deer bowed its head because they knew, from now on, a new figure would walk with them. Not a hunter, but a goddess among beasts. Wish 3. A group of fellow goddesses who also vow chastity, so no one has to look back. Artemis didn't choose to walk alone. She chose a team with no space for romantic drama. There, no one was forced to love. No one judged for not needing love. And so, a crew was chosen, not by beauty or bloodline, but by the silence in their hearts. Girls unafraid of the night. Young spirits who knew not all softness needs a shoulder to lean on. They came from everywhere. Daughters of rivers, granddaughters of winds, sisters of deer, and forgotten children who knew how to walk without a sound. Artemis didn't teach them how to shoot. She taught them how to listen, not how to fight, but how not to surrender. From then on, whenever you heard footsteps over forest leaves at night, you knew a band of goddesses was patrolling, not to protect humans, but to guard the freedom of those who refuse to be loved the wrong way. Wish 4. Let the forests, streams, and wild lands be my shelter. I need no palace or throne. No one expected a goddess to ask for forests, but to Artemis, where wild beasts left tracks, that was kingdom, and howls in the night, that was anthem. She didn't need a throne. Thrones are easy to topple. She needed a place that couldn't be redrawn by greedy hands, and so she chose the woods. There, no one taxed the air. No one censored the insects. No god squatted on gold mines, because no one could uproot ancient trees. The forest didn't call her name, but it remembered her footprints. Every stream was her mirror, every rock a rest for her bow. She moved through nature as part of it. No conquest, no claim. But every creature knew, the goddess is here, and silence is the only greeting needed. Wish 5. Grant me the right to deliver babies, so I can help women give birth alone, like my mother once did. Zeus flinched. A huntress goddess, delivering babies. But in Artemis's heart, birth and death were two sides of the same arrow. She didn't distinguish blood from womb and blood from war. The memory of her mother, goddess Leto, still lingered. Her body soaked in sweat, her breath broken in the wild woods. No one came to help. No one dared. Because Hera, Zeus's official wife, had decreed anyone helping Leto would suffer the wrath of heaven. And so, the woman gave birth to 2 children on hot stone, with insects buzzing, no celebration, no hands to catch the firstborn, only wind. Artemis, born before Apollo, delivered her brother, literally, by instinct, by divine intuition. And from that moment, she knew, if mother ever needed someone to hold her hand, then so will other women. The huntress goddess, yet the first to step into a birthing tent, not with knives, but with eyes saying, I'm here now. Wish 6. Give me loyal hunting dogs, not to command, but to walk beside. And so Pan, god of the wild, brought her the first dogs, skinny, wild, but attuned to eye contact. Wish 7. And finally, let my name enter legend not because of love, but because of who I am. Not as a wife, not as a mother, not as someone's side character in a tragedy. She was Artemis, independent, primal, not needing a man to be remembered. Then, she bowed her head and spoke her vow. I vow never to love anyone, never to let anyone touch my heart in the name of destiny. Whoever dares shall die. Not because Artemis hated love, but because she understood, in this world, love is too often used to control, bind, and destroy. And so the contract was sealed. No paperwork, no blood, no stamp. Just a goddess standing in the woods, holding a bow, eyes unblinking, and the universe nodded. From that day, her name echoed at night like the sound of deer fleeing, like arrows sinking into human hearts. Artemis, the goddess no one could tame. No one taught Artemis how to reach the forge of the Cyclopes. She just arrived, as if her feet knew the path to take, as if the metal itself called out for the one who would turn it into a weapon. 3 one-eyed giants were hammering as if furious with the universe. Brontes, thunder, stirrups, lightning, arges, the silent flame. When she stepped in, they didn't look at her. But the hammers stopped. The wind held its breath. The coals burned slower. I've come for a bow, not to ask for it, but to make it. The Cyclopes looked at her, a child not yet 10, but eyes like she had lived through 10 great wars. They asked, "What do you want? A gift from Olympus?" She shook her head. "I want something no one can give. I want precision." They laughed, a laugh like boulders cracking mountains, but not mocking. It was respect. Brontes handed her an unheated piece of bronze. "Try it." And Artemis, unafraid of hammers, unafraid of fire, struck the first beat. Her hands were small, but her rhythm was steady. Her palms blistered, reddened from the heat. But she didn't pull back. Each strike was not strong, but echoed farther than Brontes' thunder. At one point, the flames changed color, from red to blue, as if bowing. Steel doesn't remember the god's words, but it remembers the first hand that touched it. Steropes adjusted the forge. Arges exhaled smoke. None of them spoke. They only watched her work. Brontes looked at her like watching a storm learn to breathe. Steropes tilted his head, as if a strange light shone through the child. Arges let out smoke and nodded, like witnessing the impossible. A night passed like a dream, and when the sun rose, a cold, curved Kydonia bough lay in her hands, as if it had been waiting for 1,000 years. The quiver, she carved herself, stripped bark, sharpened tips, engraved each groove. I don't need anyone to grant me the right to hunt. I just need the tools. The rest, I'll decide. From that day on, the Cyclopes passed on a truth. No one taught that girl to forge weapons, but weapons bore when they returned to her hands, not because her hands were strong, but because her will never trembled. Weapons are not loyal to those who beg for them. They only serve the one who reminds them what they were made for. As the bow was the first thing Artemis forged, but not the only thing she wielded. When you're the goddess of the hunt, you don't pick weapons for beauty. You pick because prey doesn't stay still. And the forest always changes the direction of the wind. The bow, to kill from afar, without getting close to the world. The Kydonia bow never needed decoration. It curved like the river's source, where death arrives without notice. Her arrows didn't cheer, they hissed, and they didn't aim for the heart, but for instinct. When arrows hissed through the air, they pierced not just flesh, but decision. The hunted didn't die from the arrow, but from choosing the wrong direction to run. And sometimes, what she struck was hesitation. She didn't need to look, just listen. The hiss of wind, the tremble of leaves, enough to decide life or not. The spear, when distance must be torn open, the spear was her tool for quick endings. When the gap between beauty and death was too short to hesitate, one throw, one flight, one sharp breath. Not every prey deserved to die by arrow. Some things, like nightmares, needed to be stabbed straight. Some weren't forest beasts, but bad memories in human skin. Some didn't growl, but whispered each night in a child's sleep. For those, Artemis didn't shoot, she threw. Once, never again. The net, to hold back what must not escape. Not everyone knows Artemis used a net, but she did. A net woven from Mother Doe's hair and vines from the deep forest. Not to capture, but to hold. Not to expose, but to force stillness. Some creatures didn't deserve death, but weren't allowed to continue. The wind, a weapon no one could control. She learned to listen to the wind, then learned to speak through it. The wind brushing her shoulder made fur stand up. The wind sweeping the forest shifted deer, triggered traps. Wind was signal, ally. The unseen arm of Artemis. The wind didn't blow because of her. It paused when she signaled. No one saw her step in, but they saw leaves still, animals bow, and silence spread like mist. When the whole forest stopped breathing, the last one to notice was already too late. No one sees the wind, but everyone knows when Artemis arrives. And if you hear the wind stop, then maybe you're next. The 4 divine golden deer weren't just ordinary steeds. Each carried within itself a unique personality, like an animal version superhero team. The first one, named Phos, was the gentlest. Its steps were as light as morning dew, gliding like a lullaby for the entire forest. When Phos passed by, even the birds stopped singing just to hear the sound of its hooves echo in the distance. The second, called Takis, was the warrior of speed. It ran so fast that even lightning bolts had to concede defeat. Some say that once, Takis ran so fast it took off into the sky, skimming past the Orion constellation, leaving even the famed hunter god stunned. The third was Skleros, the steadfast one, not flashy, not hasty, but every step as solid as an unbroken promise. Skleros was the anchor of the team, pulling the chariot through the roughest terrains of the ancient forest. The fourth, named Lycos, was perhaps the clumsiest, but also the cleverest. It danced around, wagged its tail, and even the slyest foxes had to stay on guard. Lycos often made Artemis laugh, because in such a serious team, there was still one rascal to keep things interesting. Each golden horned deer radiated a mystical light, waking the forest whenever they drew the divine chariot across the land. They weren't just physical strength. They symbolized the power, purity, and speed of the goddess of the hunt. When these 4 golden riders walked the earth, their hooves thundered, their horns shimmered through ancient trees, and every creature bowed in awe. If the 4 golden deer were obedient knights, then the Kerenician hind was the wild child of the squad. Unlike its siblings, the hind refused to pull the divine chariot or march in sync like clockwork. It frolicked through the woods, darted over streams, hid in thickets, leaving foxes and hares chasing after it in vain. Its golden antlers and hooves glimmered under the moonlight like a declaration. Freedom is something no god can bind. Myths tell that the Kerenician hind gave many heroes a headache, like Heracles, who was tasked with capturing it in one of his 12 legendary labors. He chased it across continents and oceans, but could never catch the swift, clever creature that moved like a shadow. That deer became a symbol of rebellion, of a free spirit that wouldn't be tamed. It didn't want to be a cog in a divine machine. It wanted to run wild, on its own rhythm. If you've ever wanted to break free from the mold, leave behind the rules and the voices of others, then the Kerenician hind is your perfect companion in the mythic world. The golden deer-drawn chariot wasn't just transportation. It was an undeniable symbol, equal to war chariots of ancient battles, but not made for war, made to fly like lightning and vanish like wind. The sound of hooves was thunder. The golden glow lit the forest, and all creatures stood still in reverence. As the chariot swept across mountain tops and plunged through thick woods, nature itself seemed to blend into its legendary strength. Artemis and her deer were symbols of purity, strength, and limitless freedom. The deer were not mere servants, but beloved companions, helping her keep nature's balance. They embodied agility, protection, and grace. Artemis wasn't just the goddess of the hunt. She was guardian of the vulnerable. And the deer were the living proof of that truth. This story of the golden deer and their lightning chariot is also a story about each of us. Sometimes we need endurance, like the steadfast deer pulling the cart. Sometimes we need speed and flexibility, like the lightning deer. And sometimes we need freedom, like the rebellious Serenitian hind. In life, we must balance strength with softness, control with surrender. And if tonight you hear the echo of hooves in the distance, remember you are dreaming of a world where legends still walk in the dark. Artemis wasn't just the goddess of sharp arrows, curved bows, and flash-speed chariots. She was a mother, not one who bore children, but one with a heart felt and respected by all fragile creatures. In the forest, fawns are the purest beings, their eyes clear like jade untouched by dust. Artemis protected those eyes with everything she had. She was the hunter who didn't kill fawns, but let them run to safety. They say that when a fawn sees her figure, it stops, unafraid, as if waiting for the protection only she can give. A rarely told legend says that one night, Artemis came upon a wounded fawn, blood trickling from its leg like red thread on grass. Silently, she removed her cloak, knelt down, and wrapped the wound. Not with magic, but with patience, with gentleness. The fawn, though trembling, stayed still, as if it knew she wasn't there to hunt, but to shelter. She wasn't born to kill everything weaker than her. She was born to protect what couldn't protect itself yet. Not just fawns, even bear cubs were watched over by her, despite their wild, powerful blood. The cubs rested safely in their dens, knowing that outside was a goddess who would let no harm near. Artemis could shoot deadly arrows, but she was also the softest when lifting a newborn creature. An old tale from northern valleys says, one night, lightning set the forest ablaze. Animals panicked, fleeing toward cliffs. One bear cub got stuck in a crevice, flames close, smoke blinding. Then came a figure, calm, unhurried. Artemis walked through fire like walking through a dream. She cradled the cub and carried it out to the blaze. They say that ever since, bears gaze at crescent moons with an oddly gentle look, as if remembering a forest embrace only they ever knew. Once, a stranger entered the woods and drew his bow toward a sleeping fawn hidden in the brush. But before the arrow flew, it snapped, not by hand, but by Artemis's gaze. She stepped from the trees, placed the broken arrow in his palm, and whispered, "This is my forest, and in my forest, life isn't ended by arrogance." What's most special about Artemis is her unique blend of strength and gentleness. Her heart, though untouched by romantic love, carried a power that made enemies tremble and the weak return to her. If others' hearts are flesh and blood, hers is a bronze shield inlaid with silver. It doesn't melt, doesn't bend, but whoever tries to touch it burns with its fire. It can't be stolen, held, or wounded, because the price would be the entire forest rising. Those who harm what she shelters must face her unyielding wrath. Because to Artemis, every creature deserves life and protection. She doesn't hunt for thrill. She maintains the balance between life and death. She's the guardian of the wild, who forbids senseless destruction. And if one night you hear rustling leaves, soft steps not made by man, think of Artemis, the goddess with the untouchable heart, watching over fawns and cubs as they sleep in nature's embrace. Sleep well, friend, who dreams of a world where even the smallest beings have a goddess to protect them. Some loves don't need promises, and there are moments, fleeting as they are, that can make even a goddess step back inside herself. When Artemis first saw Orion, she didn't gasp, she didn't speak, but something in her chest shifted, just slightly, as if a heart forged in discipline and frost had been grazed by a single warm thread. She didn't call it love, just a strange feeling, a wind blowing the wrong way, a scratch too faint to bleed, but deep enough to make her linger. No kisses, no hand-holding, nothing but presence and loss. Orion was a hunter, a mortal, a man bold enough to shoot arrows at the sun. And strangely, he made Artemis, the icy goddess of the deep woods, pause when she looked into his eyes. They didn't meet at a festival. They met in a hunt. No music, no poetry, just leaves crunching underfoot, arrows slicing through air, and one careless sentence, "You shoot well." No one said Artemis blushed, but her bow quivered that day. They didn't hold hands, they didn't whisper under the moon. They hunted, together, silently. She walked ahead, Orion behind. The forest, usually whispering with leaves, was oddly still that day, as if every tree, every drop of dew, held its breath, not to break the delicate rhythm between two souls who dared not speak each other's names. Some days she led, some days he did, but never side by side. And then the rumors came. The goddess is in love. Apollo, Artemis's brother, did not like that, not out of jealousy. But he had just lost his own love, Daphne, a virgin nymph of Artemis's own circle. The wound was fresh, and now his sister, she who vowed chastity, smiled when someone mentioned Orion. So tragedy began, not with war, but with a prank. One day, as Orion swam far off the coast of Delos, Apollo called Artemis to the beach. "See that dot way out there? Bet you can't hit it." Artemis, without doubt, without question, drew her bow. Time froze. Sound disappeared. Only the taut string's breath remained, tight and trembling in her chest. The arrow flew, so slowly, everyone could almost see its path, like a thread of fate being tightened, and the sound of surf breaking was like someone's heart. That tiny dot was Orion's head. When she realized, it was too late. No screams, no tears, just a goddess stepping into the sea and cradling the only man who ever made her slow her stride. Artemis didn't bring Orion home. She sent him to the stars. like placing a wound in the sky, so it would glow but never heal. She turned him into the constellation Orion, so whenever she looked up, he'd be there, not far, but never closer. Apollo, cruel in his pride, didn't stop. He raised the scorpion that killed Orion into the sky too, Scorpius, so that whenever Orion rises, Scorpius sets, and vice versa. An endless chase. A love that never ended, because it never really began. Sleep well. If your heart has ever ached for someone you never dared to call love, maybe, just maybe, somewhere up in the stars tonight, Orion is still looking your way, just like he once looked at Artemis. Since the day Artemis shot the man she never dared to love, and returned to the forest where they once hunted together, she noticed something strange. The darkness no longer crept up to swallow her. It stood still, like a friend waiting for her to come back. No one spoke Orion's name anymore, but every tree, every stone seemed to remember, and that silence wrapped around her for the first time, not as a threat, but as something tender. Darkness was no longer a monster. It was an ally. It hid her sadness, kept her sighs, guarded tears that never fell outside, and above all, the moon became her home. Every night, its imperfect light followed her. No one ever asked Artemis why the moon became her symbol, but maybe because every time she walked through the woods, the moon hovered at her back, watching, not questioning, not judging, just there. But if you've ever loved without being loved back, ever walked alone through a midnight forest with only your heartbeat for company, you'll understand. The sun is too bright. It exposes everything. But the moon, it's gentle. It keeps secrets. It's bright enough so you don't lose your way, but dim enough to let you hide your wounds. She walked the night forest like memory itself. Every rock, every branch had once seen her smile. Now they stay quiet for her. When the moon is crescent, her heart is full. Mortals think the full moon is strongest, but it's not. When the moon is just a sliver, a faint gleam floating in blackness, that's when Artemis feels most real. The crescent doesn't try to be whole. Just like Artemis, she doesn't need to be complete to be fully present. Both are unfinished pieces, but enough to light a whole night. That's when her steps are softer, her aim sharper, and her silence deeper. The moon doesn't shine with its own light, but reflects another's, just like her, living off Orion's memory every time she looks up, steps with no sound. Not because she wanted to be quiet, but because some griefs must be walked through, not told. People still call Artemis a warrior, but that night, a little fox padded beside her feet, not fleeing, not afraid. It knew. Tonight the goddess wasn't hunting. It walked with her like a shadow, quiet, because even the wind didn't dare stir her sorrow. A goddess, untouchable. But the forest knew. On certain moonlit nights, she just stood still, bow down, eyes off prey, head tilted up, and breathed deeply. And if you, dear listener, have ever lost someone without saying goodbye, you're not alone. The moon carries your memory across the forest too. tonight. Look up. Maybe, just maybe, Artemis is looking your way too. Everyone loves a gentle goddess until they talk too much, stare too long, or dare to touch what she keeps to herself. Artemis doesn't get mad by slamming tables or throwing cups. She doesn't scream. She doesn't need to. Because the fury of a goddess is something that makes mountains tremble, and the moon stays hidden. Niobe, a mother with too many children and too little humility. Niobe wasn't evil. One of her children, the youngest, maybe a little girl, had time to glance back at her mother before she fell. Her eyes held no blame, no understanding. Just a silent question. Why are they so angry, mother? And that look stayed burned into Niobe's memory like a scar that never heals. She just didn't know when to shut her mouth. When regular folks brag, they lose friends. But when you brag to a goddess, you lose children. Niobe, Queen of Thebes, had 14 children, 6 boys and 8 girls, or 7 and 7. Who can really count? She looked at the statue of Leto, mother of Artemis and Apollo, and scoffed. 2, that's it. And then Artemis and Apollo stepped out of the forest shadow. They didn't argue. They didn't preach. They simply acted. On a quiet afternoon filled with falling blood and dead winds, the children dropped one by one, like fading notes in a symphony that should never have played. In the end, only Niobe stood. No one struck her. No one needed to. Because sometimes, silence after loss is the deepest punishment of all. Actaeon, a hunter who looked wrong and became a deer. Actaeon wasn't a villain. He just happened to step into the wrong patch of forest at the wrong time, where Artemis was bathing in dim moonlight. And then he looked, as if that gaze stretched over centuries. He looked, and the whole forest held its breath. No leaves fell, no bugs chirped, just suffocating stillness, where time froze under an unwelcome glance. He said nothing. He didn't move forward, but he looked, and that was more than enough. To Artemis, that look was a cut, small, but irrevocable. No one had the right to see a goddess when she lays down her armor. She didn't scream. She didn't cover herself. She just stood there, cold and upright like her own shadow, and turned Actaeon into a stag. His loyal hounds didn't recognize their master. One of them, the eldest, raised by him since birth, hesitated for a second. Maybe it smelled something familiar. Maybe memory and instinct wrestled in his throat. But then, twisted by divine instinct, it snarled and lunged. They tore him apart in the forest, beneath a speechless moon. Artemis can be kind. She doesn't kill with her hands, but with violated boundaries, like a forest that knows how to punish those who walk the wrong path. But don't force her to be a warning. Because the last thing you might see is her eyes, not angry, just still like a lake before the storm. Sometimes, apologies aren't spoken. They're made of stone, of columns, of rooftops raised through thunder and trembling hands. Humans may not understand Artemis, but they fear her. And sometimes, fear is a form of worship. The temple of Artemisia was built in Ephesus, where the wind smells like the sea and the ground still holds the heat from the deep belly of old legends. There was an old stone mason, the last survivor of the original temple crew. Whenever someone asked about Artemis, he didn't say much, just lifted his head, looked toward the remaining columns, and nodded quietly. In his eyes, each stone wasn't just part of a building, but a plea, a hope humans sent to the sky, praying the goddess would understand, even if they didn't dare get close. No one knows who first had the idea to build a temple so large, so beautiful, as an offering to Artemis, but people remember it was so massive that birds could fly for hours and still not pass the whole roof. It shimmered in the sunset like her golden bow. And then it burned. In the night, the people of Ephesus swarmed like ants before a storm. They carried buckets, wet cloths, bare hands, and eyes filled with horror. Some dropped to their knees in the square, tears mixing with smoke, begging the goddess for mercy. Some said nothing, just stood there, silently watching the roof collapse, like a lifelong faith turning to ash in front of their eyes. Not because the goddess was angry, but because one mortal, named Herostratus, wanted fame. He set it on fire. And now history remembers his name, not the names of those who sweat and bled to raise every stone. They rebuilt it, bigger, more beautiful, taller. Because humans, even after being punished by gods, still believe that if they build something good enough, pure enough, they might be forgiven. Maybe Artemis never stepped into that temple. Maybe she still walks the forest, speaking to moonlight and deer. But some nights, when wind rushes through the temple's halls, someone says they hear footsteps, light as breeze, gliding across stone as if they never touch the ground. Not everything built for gods is used by them, and if you pass those ruins today, don't forget to bow your head, not for the goddess, but for the effort of those who once believed that wind could carry a prayer. Because sometimes, just building it is already a way for humans to forgive themselves. When Artemis walked through the forests of Greece, people called her the Huntress. When she crossed into Roman lands, they called her Diana and placed a crown on her head. Perhaps even gods must adapt to local culture. But Diana didn't complain. She was still herself, just a version with more rituals, more marble statues, and more pine forests instead of oaks. And instead of wild deer, marble hunting dogs stood motionless in temple courtyards, unable to let out a single howl. Diana wasn't that different from Artemis. Still the bow and arrow, still the moonlight, still the gentle silence that could kill arrogance. But the Romans had a habit of throwing grand festivals. They built temples, they raised statues, they paraded Diana through cities like a queen who never sat on a throne. And sometimes she stood still on the cold altar, amid ceremonial music, eyes looking past the priest's shoulder toward a southern forest, where no one made her wear a crown. People prayed to Diana for harmonious marriages, for bountiful harvests, for vows of chastity to remain unbroken. But on some night, no one knows exactly when, someone saw a figure pass through the ancient forest beneath the Alban hills. Not a statue, not a person, but a goddess. she moved as lightly as mist, still held her bow, a temple guard who swore he never believed in gods, told this story. That night, while checking the southern fence, he felt the wind stop blowing, the torch stop burning, and his heart stop beating for a moment as brief as breath. He didn't see anything clearly, only knew that something had just passed by, and he stood still for a long time, as if afraid of dropping something sacred. And the crown, she left it hanging on a pine branch, as if to say, even goddesses get to choose the days they're simply themselves. And the next morning, that pine branch bent low, as if it had held a secret too heavy for one night, as if to say again, even goddesses get to choose the days they're simply themselves. Artemis had no children. She had no husband, no lover, no arms to lull babies to sleep each night. But she had an entire generation of daughters, not born from her, but raised within the safe space she silently guarded. When a little girl got lost in the forest, ancient Greeks didn't call the police. They whispered prayers to Artemis, not to guide her path, but to give her enough courage to keep walking until she found the light on her own. Artemis was the goddess of children growing up, especially when they had no idea what they'd grow into. She didn't teach sewing or gracefulness, but she taught how to look straight into the dark and still know you're whole. In many cities, people built temples to Artemis on the edge of town, as if she were the final fence between a girl and the world. Many strange rituals were held to mark the coming of age of girls, but amid all the chants, the animal blood, and the rising incense, Artemis only cared about one thing. Would the girl dare keep her wildness? There's a myth that girls on the brink of puberty had to live a few days in the forest, becoming Artemis's bear cubs, no talking, no mirrors, only learning to listen to the forest and to themselves. Years later, one girl who went through the rite said, that first night, every sound felt like a predator, the wind, the snapping twigs, even her own breath. She sat still until she realized the clearest thing she heard wasn't a wild beast, but her own heartbeat. And from then on, she was never afraid of what couldn't be named. Some girls came back and never smiled the same way again. Their smiles became like ash, still warm, but no longer burning. Others learned to smile more truthfully. Artemis never called herself a mother, but sometimes an arrow shot from far away can be a hug. Just no one dares to call it that. But maybe, in the moment, a girl ties up her hair for the first time, raises her voice in a crowded market, or refuses to bow to an unjust scolding. A white shadow walks beside her, still holding a bow, eyes forward, feet never straying from the soft grass path. Have you ever walked alone through the woods after midnight? If you have, and you're alive to tell the tale, congratulations. You didn't catch the attention of Artemis or her friends, because if you had, you might have become a legend people whisper about after the campfire goes out. Artemis didn't walk alone, not because she was afraid, but because darkness is something you can share, if you know how to befriend it instead of fearing it. And in that darkness, other spirits wandered too, not because they were lost, but because they belonged there. Hecate was one of them. There's a myth of a young girl, one night, standing at a crossroads deep in the forest. Each path flickered with torchlight, dim like breath. She trembled, unsure which to choose, and right then, a soft whisper touched her ear. Not just advice, but a greeting. From one who watches over crossroads no one dares face alone. The goddess of three-way paths, of spells, of the whispers you hear when everyone else is asleep. If Artemis guarded the border between forest and man, then Hecate guarded the edge between life and death. They didn't talk often, but there's a rumor. Whenever a girl stands at the edge of choice and fear, two white shadows appear behind her, one holding a bow, one holding a torch. No one pushes, but both will wait until you step forward. And Pan, the forest god, the whistler behind the bushes, the one who made girls run screaming home, or sit dazed and blushing, not sure why. Pan wasn't dangerous, but he wasn't invited. He was like that guest who always brought weird cookies to the party. No one kicks him out of politeness, but no one asks him back either. He lingered at the edge of the woods, told stories no one asked for, whistled off-key tunes, and somehow people missed him when he was gone. So he remained like laughter behind your back. You weren't sure if it was real or just the wind. Artemis usually ignored him, but some nights, if Pan played a tune well enough, she paused for a few seconds, just a few, then kept walking. Not everyone wanted to be Artemis's friend. Not everyone could stay quiet enough to walk beside her in the dark. But if one night you hear bare footsteps over dry leaves, a flicker at a crossroads, and a flute playing from somewhere you can't place, don't look back, just keep walking. You might be under the protection of those you never dared to name. Do you know who the most intimidating person in the room is? Not the one who shouts the loudest. It's the one who doesn't have to say anything, and still makes the whole room hold its breath. Artemis doesn't command. She doesn't raise a hand to make others kneel, but the trees lean when she walks by. The young deer slows its steps. The wolf does not howl, because true power doesn't need to scream to be noticed. It's a presence, like the wind before a storm, like a full moon before a sacrifice. You feel it before you even see it. There was once a Greek king who ordered a temple built for Artemis, but dared to carve his own name larger than hers. The next morning, the statue was cracked. No one knew why. Only a little farm girl said, "I saw a woman in a cloak walking around the temple all night. Didn't say a word, but the wind stopped blowing when she passed." While other goddesses choose thunder, raging seas, or curses, Artemis needs only silence, because her silence is not emptiness. It's a kind of message, like a question you haven't asked yet, like a dream you haven't remembered. No one remembers exactly where Artemis was that night, only that the forest was quieter than usual, and the moon fuller than ever. She left no message, erected no statue, called for no celebration. She simply passed through, like a breeze that lingers with the scent of pine, then disappears. But those who encountered her, even once, carried something with them. Not a trace, but a feeling, like you were protected, even if no one ever wrapped their arms around you. Artemis never asked to be loved, never questioned. Do you still remember me? Yet strangely, she is the last thing people remember. When everything else has faded from memory, she's the glint on the lake you saw at 5 a.m., the sound of light footsteps in the forest when you thought you were alone, the figure who turned away just when you needed them most, but also when you finally stood up on your own. Freedom, strength, sorrow, and silence all wear the shape of Artemis. And if tonight you catch the moon outside your window, smile. No need to say thank you. Just live as best as you can, because maybe someone walked ahead so you wouldn't have to fear the dark anymore.